I recommended you to them. So I'm
Thank you, Shayla. You're the best.
because you made me look good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live react of our abortion debate that we had with Naima. 1v20, 20 pro-lifers and one pro-choicer. These are my friends that I've invited. Liana was actually on the episode with me, so she has a lot of thoughts. And then my good friend pro-life Chloe, she's just a pro-life beast when it comes to content creation. And I have another abortion debate that is not out yet that Chloe, me and her kind of went over some scripture together because it was with pro-choice Christians. And so, anyways, I just wanted to invite her on here because I know she's going to have a lot of really good thoughts. Ladies, can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. My name is Liana Graham. I work at the Heritage Foundation as a research assistant. I work in domestic policy, and I have been doing a lot of abortion related advocacy, writing, research, etc. Honestly, since high school, mainly did a lot more in university. So I'm really excited to kind of elaborate more on the debate and finally get to talk about some of the prompts that I was not on. So that was probably the biggest thing. Like when I left, I was like, dang, I wish I was on that prompt. So this
Yeah,
is a really fun
whenever you're
opportunity.
part of a 1v20, it's like you want to react to the prompts you weren't on because you have so much to
Yeah.
say that you weren't able to your
Yes.
prompt. And what's
Yes.
funny is when the reaction videos come out, typically people are like, "Why didn't you say this during the debate?" It's like it wasn't my prompt. I didn't get to. Now is my
Right.
prompt.
And even on your own prompt, and we'll get into this, but like, you're with three other people. So there is a lot to say in so little time. So thank you, Shayla, for having me on. I'm
Yeah,
really excited
I'm
for,
excited.
our analysis.
Yes, Chloe.
Hello, my name is Pro Life Chloe. I'm a pro life advocate for quite some time now. I'm an author of a pro life book named called Unapologetically Pro Life. And yeah, I'm very excited to react. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Yes, hence your
So
name,
yeah.
Pro Life Chloe. Very well
Hmm.
on the subject. Yeah, so I before we get into reacting to this video, highly encourage anyone who's watching to, if you are interested in pro-life apologetics, to follow Liana and pro-life Chloe because they're both fantastic. I definitely want to continue learning from these ladies because they're both highly intelligent and well read on the subject.
Too
So with
sweet.
that being said, I'm going to oh, I have another friend who's joining us. This is Taylor. Everyone say hi to Taylor.
What's up,
Hello.
guys?
Taylor
Hi.
was on the debate with us. Taylor, can you introduce yourself to everyone?
What's up? I'm Taylor. I was also on the debate. I do social media and stuff. I'm a writer. So what's up?
Yes, Taylor killed it. Absolutely. So we're gonna go ahead and just get straight into it because I we only have so much time. Um, so let's go ahead and start with the first prompt. And ladies, help me out here. If you like, you tell me when to pause, and if you have something to say. So tell me when to pause, okay? Because it takes me a little bit of time to mute myself and hit play. So tell me when.
Is a fetus is not a baby and does not deserve full constitutional protections.
I'm Noelle. I'm Maya. I'm Shayla. I'm Yasmin.
Okay, hi ladies. So I chose this prompt mainly because of the kind of equal protections movement that's been going on in pro-life circles. This belief that a fetus is the same as a human that has already been born. I disagree with that, and I don't believe that they deserve full protections under the law.
So I think we need to clarify a little bit. As a pro-lifer, I don't believe that a fetus is valuable because they're a baby. I believe they're valuable because they are an innocent human being. The scientific consensus for when life begins is fertilization. That is what 96% of biologists agree from across 1,000 different academic institutions is when the beginning of a new, unique human being's life begins. Not just human cells, not just a human life, but a new, unique human being.
So if I could just jump in there is no scientific consensus on when life begins. There is
So
not.
this is from the National Institute of Health.
Yes,
The scientific
there is.
96% of biologists agree that a new, unique human being's life begins at fertilization.
I'm sorry, love, this is not true.
But it is. I just gave you the source. Do you
It
have
is
a dispute?
undeniably
When do
not
you
true.
believe that a fetus becomes a human?
Well, I don't believe that I can say when a life begins. I don't believe that anyone in this room can say that when a life begins.
What?
Her is who gets to say when life begins. If no one in this room, like that's okay. One, she's wrong. Okay, we're like I already made a video on this today on Instagram where she's just absolutely wrong. And I love Maya that she shared her source. She didn't just say this is my opinion. She shared her. There's Taylor. I shared. She shared her source of where she's getting this information from, right? And then she still said that's not true. And then Maya said, okay, well, you got to refute it. Where's your source? She doesn't have anything. And then she says, well, no one in this room. So my question to her would have been, which we didn't have time to do, who gets to determine when life begins? If we don't get to determine, if you're going to deny the the source that we presented to you, who gets to determine when life begins?
Yeah, the thing is, her position is actually internally inconsistent as well, because she goes on to say, and we'll see that when you replay the video, that we don't know when life begins, apparently, because there isn't a consensus, which there is. By like what a consensus is that the vast majority of people agree. So I think she's maybe assuming consensus means complete and total unanimity, which is not what consensus means. Then she goes on to say that viability is what we know. So we don't know when life begins, but we know when viability begins. But viability presupposes, one, a definition of life, because what viability is the ability to survive on your own. So the concept of viability presupposes a definition of life. So you can't know when viability begins if you don't know when life begins. That is an internally inconsistent position. And secondly, viability is actually less objective and established by science as fertilization, because viability shifts with technological development. Like, we have had different standards of when viability is possible for preborn human life because of changing technological developments and science. So those are the two main problems I see with right off the bat with what she's saying, is that it's internally inconsistent. And secondly, she uses a different standard to evaluate and establish viability that is actually less strong than the standard that would be used to establish the objective scientific fact that human life, i.e., a human organism, so we're speaking biologically, begins at fertilization. Something I see a lot of pro-choicers do when it comes to this question is that they tend to equivocate, which means that they'll use a term in two different ways in a way that is very confusing. So sometimes what pro-choicers will do is they'll say, life doesn't begin at conception, but what they mean by the term life in that sentence isn't biological organismal life, but rather personhood, or when a human being becomes valuable.
Yeah,
so it's very important to be clear.
In the comment section of my video, someone was saying, we just don't know when life, they're very clearly conflating personhood with biological life. And here we're talking about biological life.
Right. No, exactly. So I think those are the main problems. And right off the bat, I think a lot of pro-choicers who are well read on this issue, who are aware of the philosophical arguments in support of abortion, are able to make that distinction. So I think that it might have just been a definitional error, but it's something that is important to keep in mind in abortion debate, because oftentimes if those definitions are clearly established from the beginning, that's when people start talking past each other. So this is, I think, an example of that, but I think it's confusing.
Because Maya didn't just give the source, she actually quoted it and said 96% of biologists. So she's making it even in her statement. We're talking about what the biologists are agreeing on here. We're not talking about personhood right now. We're talking about the science.
The other thing too is that when I've seen this happen before in professional debates and also just in personal conversations I have with people on certain things, I will cite like a source. Like, I won't explicitly say the source, but I'll say like research has shown sort of X, Y, and Z. And like, I'm getting ready to explain what the source is and maybe what my evidence is for that position. And I've had the experience of the person just immediately shooting that down and saying that's not true. And to me, that just kind of betrays confirmation bias, because you haven't actually taken the time to consider anything that I'm saying, but you're basing your rejection of my claim based on the conclusion and not based on the evidence. And I think that this is an example of Naima doing that. She's got a firm ideological commitment to believing her position. And honestly, what I personally think a lot of pro-choicers do is they start with the conclusion and they find the best possible argument to fit it, because that's what explains them always shifting the goalpost. And you'll see her do this all throughout the debate. She starts with saying, well, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go through this prompt. She starts by saying that her standard for when human life becomes legally protected in this country is birth. And then she goes on to contradict herself in the next sentence by affirming Roe v. Wade, which did not say that birth is the standard, but that viability was the standard, and it could devise a trimester framework that allowed states to regulate abortion in the third trimester. So this shifting of the goalpost, constantly kind of changing the position, I think is demonstrative of a worldview, or at the very least a thinking process that starts with the conclusion and then tries to find all the available evidence that is capable of fitting into the conclusion, rather than starting with the evidence and then reasoning through by way of the evidence to the conclusion. And I think that, I mean, not to speculate too much about the psychology behind the position, but I think that might be why we see such inconsistency in all of the shifting of the goalposts throughout the debate.
I know you guys probably have a lot more to say, but I'm going to keep playing here.
I think that the only one who can really say when a life begins is God. And though it's not stated, because it's not stated in the Bible and there is no scientific consensus, we can sit here and argue about something theoretical that none of us know, or we can argue what is known. And what is known is that a fetus is not viable until around 23 to 24 weeks. The youngest ever was 20 weeks, but a fetus generally is not viable, meaning it can't survive outside of the womb until.
So what is a fetus if they aren't a human being? Because humans can only create other humans via reproduction.
A fetus
can't
is a
create
human
anything
because
other
it has
than a human
human cells, but it doesn't deserve legal personhood, right? That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about when life begins, because we can all have different definitions of that and no one knows for sure. What we are talking
So
about
pause.
is legal.
So she just contradicted herself because she said that it is human. So she means that it's, I mean, presumably she means living human, right? Because corpses are also human, but she means to say that there are cells. So yes, it's alive. She's saying, yes, it's a human and it's alive, but it's not a person. But she started off the debate saying, no, they're not alive. No, there's no scientific consensus. We can't debate about what isn't known, but only what is known.
Yeah.
I mean, that's totally ridiculous. So I think she just, she's contradicting herself.
Chloe, I saw you were dying when she said that we don't know when life begins. Only God is the one. I saw you make a face. So.
I thought this was your, like, the Christian versus, like, pro-life Christian versus pro. I'm like, are you okay? Like, first of all, that's nowhere in the prompt. Second of all, it took me 2 seconds to find a college of pediatrics to define life beginning at fertilization. It took me 2 seconds to look it up, from an actual college to look it up. And then it talks about developmental milestones. And this is something that I've actually have a video up on, just on the, I like going on TikTok and social media and debating. It was a nurse, and I asked the nurse, I told her, I said, well, if life begins at conception and you're killing the baby in the womb and you're killing something alive, it's murder. It fits the definition of murder. And she was like, well, life doesn't begin, basically what this pro-choicer was saying, it doesn't begin in the uterus, it begins during birth, like after it's born. So I said, how does something that is not alive grow and move around and continue to develop these things? And she goes, 30 years. A nurse of 30 years says, I don't have a good answer for that. I'm like, how did you become a nurse? Like, I would be terrified if you were my nurse and what am I growing? Like, what? Yeah. Am I growing? I think, cancer is alive and all that stuff, but it's not the disease. How do you not know this?
Really quick, guys, I want to introduce Micah, because Micah is joining now as well.
What's
Micah, please really quick introduce yourself to anyone who's tuning in who might not know you. Micah's a good friend, but I want you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, my name's Micah Kunkel. I'm a debater. I've appeared on the Jubilee videos, and I've debated abortion a lot on those videos. So
have you debated Naima before, like one-on-one, or no?
I have not. No, I hope to one day, but I think it would be fun to debate her. But no, I've debated a lot of different people on Jubilee, including Dean Withers on abortion. So
Micah's being humble, but Micah is a pro-life influencer. He's had quite a few clips go viral of him standing up for pro-life, and even recently he had a big debate. I don't think I'm allowed to say, but he had a big debate with someone who was scared to debate him on abortion. So Micah's
That's
true.
It's true.
Did you win? I'm sure you did.
My story to tell. I'll let Micah tell it in his own time.
Let's see. I don't know if I'll reveal who it is, but basically, well-known Democrat influencer, and at the very end of the Jubilee videos, they choose one person to have a 10-minute conversation with. So he was asking everybody what their prompts were going to be, and I said abortion. And as soon as I said abortion, he said heck no, and he moved on to someone else. Afterwards, I asked him, I was like, dude, why didn't you want to debate abortion? Like, there's such a visceral reaction to that. And he was like, well, isn't that your topic? Isn't that your thing? I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, I've watched these videos before and I've watched you debate on abortion. Like, I'm not going to debate you on that. That's your thing. That's your topic. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll take that as a compliment.
I'm sure everybody in in a one-on-one would pick their topic. So like that would be true of anybody he picked, but
Yeah.
he probably just
I think
thought,
he was basically saying he was too scared to debate me on
yeah.
it, essentially.
Mhm.
So
Well, that's where we want everyone to be who's pro-life. Is we want people who are pro-life that are so good at defending their pro-life position that people don't want to talk to us about it, almost in a way, because they know that we're going to win. And so basically, the people who are open-minded that we can win over, we will win them over. And the people who we talked about this right now, Ileana, who clearly are going in with a position that they aren't willing to change, right? They're trying to, confirmation bias. Those people don't want to debate us simply because they know that we have the correct position. So I think Mike is a great example of that. But yeah, we'll just keep going. I've already said it to the audience. I have to go in about an hour and 30 minutes, so we're gonna keep zooming through. Let's see. Here we go. Let me mute.
Personhood under the law. I do not think that something that is not yet a person, cannot speak for itself, does not have the capacity to sustain conscience or viability without the life of the mother, can be assigned the same constitutional rights as someone who can.
So then do you define personhood by people's ability to live on their own or their ability to speak? You yourself right now said that it's about someone being able to speak or someone being able to exist on their own. Is that how you define someone's worth or personhood?
No, that's not how I define someone's worth or personhood. I define someone's worth or personhood based on the 14th Amendment. So in the 14th Amendment, that's our right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all these things. We like them, right? Right? Yes. So I define personhood based on the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. It says all persons born or naturalized, right?
Can I interject here for just a second?
No, because if
Can we pause for a second?
it cannot be given.
Okay, as I was watching this back, I think this flew over my head during the debate because there are two big things, like big problems with what she just said here. But immediately when I was watching it live, I thought to myself, oh, so her standard is birth, which is crazy. And you can immediately start poking at that and deriving sort of absurd conclusions from that. But secondly, her standard is also positive law. So because Noelle didn't just ask her legally, when do you think personhood begins? She asked her, when do you think humans become valuable? And she put worth in there. And Naima responded, I think somebody is worthy and a person based on the 14th Amendment. So if you're taking like that at face value, interpreting that at face value, what she's saying is that the law is what makes you valuable.
Yes.
So like prior to the 14th Amendment's ratification, before that was written, were there persons that's just such a confusing position that one, it's a standard based upon existing positive law, not natural law, not a substance view of human beings. And also that it's predicated upon birth. And you'll find that as she continues speaking, she contradicts herself in this entire prompt because she goes on to affirm, she says, I affirm Roe v. Wade. And Roe v. Wade was a Supreme Court decision that did not base a right to abortion in the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And it did not say that there was an absolute right to abortion prior to birth because birth was the relevant legal marker. What Roe v. Wade did was establish a trimester framework that actually, when we go to my prompt, we'll talk about this, but people say that Roe v. Wade is policy disguised as law, that this trimester framework actually reads more like a medical textbook and a law or policy analysis than it does like interpreting the Constitution. But essentially, she goes on to say that I affirm Roe v. Wade, which gave states the right constitutionally to regulate abortion under the trimester framework. So there was not this absolute right to abortion, even under Roe v. Wade. So that's called being internally inconsistent. She affirms one thing, which is birth as the standard, and then goes on to say a few minutes later that actually her standard is viability based upon the framework in Roe v. Wade. So if your position is inconsistent, I think that's a very good marker for establishing that this is a bad position. Like that's just like bare minimum. You should not be contradicting yourself. And again, as we talked about earlier, this constant shifting of the goalpost, I think is representative or is an expression of somebody who has thought through with the conclusion first and then finds the evidence that will fit the position. And I think that is how a lot of people think about abortion in our culture. But that's just a huge, glaringly obvious problem with her position. Her position is birth and then viability. So it's shifting. And also, if birth is the standard, then a baby right before it's born, can you kill it? She says no. So she defeats her own standard throughout this debate. So.
Yeah. Well said.
All right, you can continue. If there's no more commentary, you can hit play. But I just had to say
The
that,
same
that
constitutional
really...
value as a human who has been born or naturalized in the U.S. Now, if you would like to respond to that.
So that's the citizenship clause, all persons born or naturalized. It's not actually a defining like fact about when human life begins, because also it goes on to say that within the jurisdiction of the United States that no person shall be basically like discriminated against under the law, right? All persons have a right to life, liberty, and due property life, liberty, and property. Sorry, I was talking a little too fast. And due process of the law, right? So with that being said, what you're saying is not implying that a fetus isn't a person, because legal personhood also classifies like corporations. So we can also argue that. But my question,
that's actually a great point, because I disagree with corporate personhood. I think that's ridiculous too, because a corporation hasn't been born, a corporation isn't naturalized, and a corporation does not have the same consequences as a human being who is alive with a conscience who has to pay taxes does, right? And we recognize this in a lot of different ways, right? Like we recognize that a toddler doesn't have the right to vote. Like we recognize that there are levels to constitutional rights.
We're talking about basic human rights, which is the right to life. And so there's been plenty of times that the law, and I'm sure you would agree with this, that the law was not backing up the full rights that every human deserves. So for instance, at one point in time, there was in the Constitution not full rights for African Americans, right? But that doesn't mean that they didn't deserve it, because at the end of the day, they were a person, they were a human. And so we're talking about basic human rights.
I'm actually not talking about basic human rights. The prompt is constitutional protections, right?
Wait,
so
sorry,
not
can you pause this?
Constitutional protections.
So she just contradicted herself again, because what Maya brought up actually was a pretty good point.
A lot
Yes.
of contradictions here.
Maya brought up a very good point, which was that, okay, think about, for example, like corporations can be persons. And then actually Naima says the perfect thing for our position, which is, I actually disagree with that. I actually don't think that corporations should be considered legal persons. What that demonstrates is that the law is not a perfect arbiter of moral truth. And that is just the point that Shayla is making. And you're really just piggybacking off of what Maya said, and then Naima jumps back in and then backtracks again and goes back to no, I'm not saying about what the law should be. All I'm saying is that this is what the law currently is.
Yeah,
so
but
she's shifting from
is like the whole point of advocacy is you see what the law is saying and doing, and if it doesn't align with what is moral and right and just, then we advocate, right, to change those laws. That's the whole, like, that's what has happened all throughout our country when it comes to human rights. And so in the same way, that is what we're doing. And they ended up clipping it out. We have to keep moving forward, but they ended up clipping it out. But at some point I actually say yes, and this was inconvenient to white people to see African Americans as full human beings, because then they wouldn't get slave work. But it doesn't matter what it was inconvenient to white people. It matters what is true. And when we take away their personhood, right, we're doing something that is morally wrong, even though the law at that time is not deeming it as morally wrong. That's the whole point of advocacy, of overturning slavery. Well, she then took that, and this got clipped out because she looked at the camera and she said, clip that out. So they clipped this out. But she ended up making it about like a color thing, where she was like, I'm sorry, Diva, am I inconveniencing you because she's colored and I'm white? She took that as if I was saying, and everyone who was in the room can testify that this is what she said. She took that as me saying, you're inconveniencing me because I'm white, I don't want you to be my slave. She's like, I don't know if she's like just perpetually always offended and that's how she hears things. I don't know if there's an IQ thing where she didn't catch the point that I was making. I actually don't know why it is that that's how she took it, but clearly the point that I was trying to make was that was wrong when we took away full personhood of African Americans. And just like it's wrong today to not give full personhood to the preborn.
The other thing is, just very quickly, I know we have to move on, but her prompt actually is written in such a way that it lends the debate toward this precise kind of conversation. Exactly. It's not about what the Constitution actually says. I mean, that's relevant, but her prompt is who deserves constitutional rights. So even if you were to grant her entire argument, which I don't think is sound, and we talk about that kind of during my prompt, but even if you were to grant, for the sake of argument, fine, let's just say that the Constitution does not recognize the preborn as full persons. I nonetheless think that they deserve constitutional protections. And guess what? We live in a republic that allows for us to resolve those kinds of issues. That's why the 14th Amendment actually exists, right? So we're able to amend the Constitution in cases where people who should be represented by the Constitution aren't. So this debate isn't just about what the Constitution says. It's what does the Constitution say, and do the preborn deserve full constitutional protection? And you can affirm the latter without saying that the Constitution definitively covers the preborn, although I do think there is a very good historical argument to be made for that case. It's not actually necessary to establish this argument. So I don't think maybe she understood that during the debate, and she kept kind of going back and forth on contradictory positions.
Yeah,
I think
well, I'm so sorry. I was gonna say before we move on to the next prompt, really quick, I do want to give the audience like a little bit of backstory on what was leading up to this conversation. So leading up to this conversation, we were told we're gonna debate a pro-choicer. We didn't know who the pro-choicer was, but we had a guess of like, okay, it could be this person, it could be that person, it could be this person. So as we were researching who could this person be that we're going to be debating, we find that Naima is live streaming on Twitch that she is the person that is preparing for this debate. This is weeks before. And she gives us all of her talking points by saying, I'm going to prep with my Twitch stream everything that I plan on saying during each one of these. So not only did she tell us basically everything she was going to say, so we were kind of like ready for it. So we knew like, okay, let's make sure we define life. Let's make sure we define personhood. Let's make sure we do all this stuff. She then at some point, and this is really showing, and I know that like we want to believe the best in everyone. I want to believe that when I go into a conversation with someone, that it is very possible that they have some degree of open-mindedness. But she also made very personal attacks on us because through a glitch, if you will, the producer accidentally put her email in an email thread with all of the pro-lifers. So she saw who all the pro-lifers were going to be, and then she live streamed to her audience our emails, and then she began to pull up our social media accounts, and she began to make fun of our looks. She began to make fun of some of these pro-lifers who were supporters of Charlie Kirk, make fun of some of their talents. Like one girl was singing a song for Charlie Kirk and she was making fun of that. She called multiple of our husbands chopped. She made fun of, she even said, well, I'm not gonna make fun of it, but look at this lady. And it's like, she's clearly like not saying what she wants to say, which is like this person, whatever she wanted to say, which is making fun of their looks. And so all of us, I want the audience who's watching right now, all, you know, people watching this live stream and whoever watches the replay, I want you to know that the grace that was exemplified all throughout this debate, it might seem like, oh, we were so kind, we were so nice. Okay, keep in mind that the person that we were debating was quite literally making personal attacks just 2 days ago. And yet we still came in with this type of attitude, with this type of energy, with this type of grace of, yeah, like let's continue to try to really talk, not make personal attacks against her, but really talk about the substance of our arguments, even after she was personally attacking us to her audience live. And she has a good following. So like keep in mind, like it's not like she was talking crap about us to her friend. She was live streaming to her audience, making fun of us. And this is still the grace that was exemplified. And I just want to say how proud I was of all of these women who showed up with this type of mercy and graciousness.
And just very quickly, to Naima's credit, just in case this doesn't get brought up later, she did apologize after the debate. And I think it'll become evident to the audience as the stream continues that it started off, I think, with a bit more hostility than obviously it ended out with. And so I think she was very moved by that, and by her own testimony she was, and she apologized to us after the fact. So it's forgiven, it's in the past. You know, we're called to forgive, so there's no ill will there. But just so that people have context, so they understand just like behind the scenes, and it really raises the stakes. Like it made me more nervous, honestly, because I thought I was going to go into debating somebody who would not be interested in being charitable and would be interested in like clip farming. And so I had to be very aware of kind of like the words I was using, the definitions I was using. So
yeah,
but she did apologize, and ultimately
yes,
I think
she apologized.
She
apologized. She took the live stream down, but I give that, yes, exactly. I give that information just so everyone watching knows, like, kind of what an uphill battle we had. You know,
and it was cool seeing her release that video. Was it yesterday?
Yeah.
Talking about her experience and how positive it was. So that was that was awesome.
That made me cry. That video made me cry. Like that was such a beautiful video, and I was so proud of everybody involved with that.
Yeah. Well, I have to move on to the next one. I really would love to hear more from like Yasmin and Maya, but just for the sake of getting through all of the video, we'll move on to the next prompt.
Should involve the right to life and liberty
across the states. So they determined because it is the killing of an innocent.
All right, my next prompt is using religion to justify a pro-life argument is unconstitutional. Hello, ladies. I'm Naima.
I'm Savannah.
I'm Rochelle.
I'm Julia Kate.
Hi, I'm Maddie. Hi, I'm Aniela.
Okay, you guys. So for this prompt, I realized after I submitted it that it was not as clear as I wanted to be. So let me make something perfectly clear. I am not here to attack whatever your faith is, whatever you believe in your life, and however it, dictates how you move in the world. That is absolutely your right. What I have an issue with is using religion to justify legislative decisions, because that's when it becomes about other people having to follow your religion. If you have a personal belief that dictates how you move, that is absolutely your right. But just don't make it my issue, is my thing.
So where does it say that in the Constitution?
In the First Amendment.
And can you explain to me what that says?
Okay. Yeah, for sure. All right. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise of religion.
Perfect. And so my thought to that is that abortion is first and foremost a human rights issue. Abortion is actually the greatest human rights issue of our time because it is the killing of an innocent human being. And so you don't need religion in order to justify it. But I will say religion is compatible with it. So I think there are some things that we can agree morally are wrong. Killing, stealing, and abortion is killing. And so I don't really understand how you think the Constitution would.
Well, okay. But so what? That's your personal belief based on your religious framework. Now justify it secularly. And if God's on your side,
right. So it's not based on religious framework. Are there certain things that we can come to by natural law?
By natural law?
Yeah. So like when we agree.
My question to her would be like, okay, then how would you, what makes you go on your beliefs? Why are your beliefs correct? If you're saying I can't use my religion when my religion is actually based in the Constitution, because the founding fathers were majority Christian and they used Christian principles, which she enjoys, including freedom, including sees every man and woman equal, right, together. I listen, I don't want a Muslim coming into my country and using Sharia law. I don't want that. So I'm going to base it on another standard. So my question would be, okay, so what's the standard? We need to have a standard of something, and we need it to justify it. We need religion to justify how we act and how we have our morals. Other than that, you can say this is you're gonna cherry pick from somewhere. You're gonna cherry pick from a religion, from an ideology.
Yeah.
So that was the point.
Everyone is bringing their morals to the voting booth. They are. The only one who get attacked for it are Christians, because Christians are honest about where we get our moral framework from.
I also think it's important to keep in mind that in debates, the person who is making the claim has the burden of proof. So Naima says that it is unconstitutional to use religion to justify being pro-life. So she's referring to legislation. And then when asked to elaborate upon that, all she does is appeal to the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. But she hasn't actually bridged the gap between the Establishment Clause and using religion to pass pro-life legislation or to personally be motivated by religious principles to justify pro-life legislation. The burden of proof is on her to connect those dots. And what I would have done if I was on that prompt is to continue pressing. Okay, so you've appealed to the Establishment Clause. Obviously, the Establishment Clause is a very contested constitutional amendment. So you are now in the territory of creating a constitutional argument. Why do I have to just accept your interpretation of the Establishment Clause without you having actually provided your interpretation? All you did was appeal to the Establishment Clause. But notice that she doesn't actually spend any time to justify why, in this case, that would constitute a violation of the Establishment Clause. We can continue. I'll give more commentary later. I have more thoughts on this, but I think that is a huge problem because 3 of her prompts were on the Constitution. But when then she was pressed to continue, expanding upon why she believed this specific interpretation of the Constitution, she kind of just took it, she just assumed it for the sake of argument rather than fully really kind of elaborating upon it or becoming prepared to have sort of a debate in recognition of the fact that obviously constitutional amendments and their applications are debatable. Right, so you need to posit a standard that you're using to interpret the Constitution and explain why that standard and that interpretation ought to be accepted over others, which she didn't provide in this debate. So she should be reminded that the burden of proof was on her in this instance.
And ultimately, she was basically saying, this should be unconstitutional. That's what she was arguing, essentially, for most of the time. She wasn't actually arguing the fact of the resolution, which was it is unconstitutional.
Right.
Is there anywhere else specifically that you guys want me to go in this prompt? because we don't have time to do the whole thing.
I think Julia Kate. I love Julia Kate. I think she did a great job. I'd love to react to her.
Are based in his faith, right? And he was vocal about that. But he was still able to create a secular argument that justified his positions based on the Constitution, natural law, and that is what I'm asking the pro-life movement to do, right?
Our secular argument is that all human life begins at fertilization.
I know that's your secular argument, but that's not a scientific, objective fact yet.
It is by molecular biology's criterion for determining life, whether something is alive or not. A zygote from the moment of fertilization meets all of the criterion. It has to do with cellular production. They have homeostasis. They response to external stimuli.
A zygote is a single cell, Diva. It hasn't even been implanted. It hasn't even been implanted in the womb
But it
yet.
knows how to implant without
No, baby, it could still be ectopic. It doesn't know how to implant.
And do you know that
they get stuck to the fallopian tubes all the
May I
time?
just finish my sentence? And
Sure.
the floor is yours. Do you know that at the moment of fertilization, everything is ultimately established, from its biological sex to its hair color, to its eye color, to its height, to even the fingerprint that it's going to have. It is not potential life. It is life with potential. And a woman has the choice to not engage in intercourse, but she does not have the choice to murder her child because it is inconvenient to her.
Well, first of all, not every woman has the choice not to engage in intercourse, as we'll get into rape, because that is a big part of this. But my point to that is, a zygote at the time of fertilization has not yet been implanted in the womb. It could still be an ectopic pregnancy. It could be a non-viable pregnancy.
Can you pause
There's
here?
fetal anomalies. You cannot.
What relevance does implantation have to establishing when
Nothing.
life begins? I think that's actually because, pro-choicers will bring up the fact that apparently the majority, somebody would have to fact check this, but I hear this said that the majority of embryos or zygotes, fail to implant, or embryos fail to implant in the uterus. And they point to that as saying that, okay, well, I actually had somebody argue this once in a Christian context, and she argued that, well, God certainly isn't pro-life if like the majority of embryos fail to implant. But what she was assuming in that argument was that a failure to implant would be a form of death, right? So like clearly failing to implant isn't a standard that determines that life hasn't begun yet. Like people recognize that as a form of miscarriage, and they rightly mourn that. So implantation is irrelevant to establishing the scientific criteria of when life begins.
Can't have
Like,
death
that's just
without
really
life.
relevant.
You can't have death without
Yes,
life.
exactly. Yeah.
Not say from the moment of conception 100% there will be a human life. So can we go back to religion for a second? So I think that, like, I appreciate the secular arguments much more, but my issue and my fear is that Christian nationalism, specifically on this issue, is allowing for people to give up their fundamental right to practice their religion the way that they want to, including Christians, because you don't all agree on exactly how your religion should be practiced. So your government should not be making legislation based on religion, because that's not necessarily your beliefs, that's that person's belief.
Naima, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So, as we've been talking about, in 2022, the standard is now the history and traditions standard. And so religious motivation is encouraged, but it cannot violate the now 3,000 now.
Right.
Shayla,
Looking at
can
the
I just
effects
say,
of what this
like,
legislation has done to hundreds of thousands of women around this country, and I can't justify.
I think she should have just said using Christianity to because that's what she's mainly attacking, because the term religion is very broad. Like, for example, because I'm Middle Eastern, I know a lot about Islam. So in Islam, you can abort up until the third trimester, until the second and third trimester. After the second and third trimester, they would be considered pro-life, but before that, you can be pro-choice. They don't believe life starts at conception in that religion. So you have to define, like, looking at different religions, they don't believe exactly like Christianity. Christianity is very unique, that we believe, and the science, that life starts at conception, at fertilization. So I would have just said, well, you're only attacking Christianity. Islam says you can abort up until the second and third trimester. Are you going to agree with that? Should we follow the Sharia and the Quran on that?
I also just think it's funny that she keeps asking. She's like, my preference is that you don't use Christianity. It's like, number one, who cares? Like, where's your authority on this? Like, you're going to argue from your framework. We would prefer you not argue from a secular humanist perspective, but here you are. And she commands, she says, oh, I'd rather you do it from a secular perspective. And then all these women say, okay, we will. Here's the biological reasons life begins at conception. Then she says, nah, Diva, that's not true. Like, it's like, okay, so we are arguing from a secular perspective and you're just denying it outright, right? And I think Maddie makes a good point in this point somewhere about how technically secular humanism is a religion, right? Like, we have to maybe even just define what religion is and the dogma that she's following. So I think she, again, just like owns herself on this one.
The protection of fetal life with how it's actually impacted living women and those children once they're born.
Have you seen a picture of a baby who's aborted at 9 weeks?
Yes,
they have little fingers and toes, and that life is not valuable to you? There are 2,000 innocent human beings killed every single day in America. That doesn't matter to you?
2,000? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you talking about
babies? in the womb.
So fetuses.
3,000 now. 3,000 now.
Right, right.
Does that not matter? Do these lives? This is the greatest human rights violation of our time.
But see, you keep talking about in the womb. I want to talk about out of the womb, right?
Okay, we
These
can talk
mothers and the lives that they are going through once they are forced to give birth to children that they do
So
not.
I do interviews all the time with women who have had abortions, and their stories and their fears and what has happened to them afterwards. It's horrible.
99% of women do not regret having an abortion who have it.
Okay, I would say
That's
But I
not
just
true.
really
That wouldn't
quickly-
matter.
I was gonna say,
It's also
yeah,
not
it's
true.
irrelevant.
like, I was gonna say
That's irrelevant.
It is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's not true. Like, also, I just want to, I want to point out that we're gonna continue to see that whenever the pro-lifers, throw out a stat, it seems like to me when I watched it back that we always provided a resource. I didn't hear one stat that she provided where she actually backed it up with where she's getting that from. 99% of women who have an abortion don't regret it. Where's she getting that from?
So she's getting that from the Turnaway study. That's where she's getting it from.
Yeah,
Which
and
has
it's-
been
and it's
criticized heavily.
Yeah, exactly. Me and Leon, I could talk about the Turnaway study for a long time. But the point is, like, she's not providing any that, and that in itself does bother me. Like, I just don't like it when people don't cite what they're.
But I think I found this when we got to my prompt is that and I also base this obviously in my knowledge of her streams, right? So I kind of got familiar with the argument she felt the most comfortable with. And I noticed that in particular moments of the debate where it seemed like she was getting pressed on certain issues, she continued to fall back on what it seemed she was comfortable with. And what she was comfortable arguing was the effects of abortion bans. And she even made that explicit on the Jubilee show when she was interviewed about her debate with Charlie Kirk, that she wants to focus on the effects of abortion bans. But that's not totally relevant to answering the main question at the heart of the abortion debate, which is what is the status of the unborn, right? So she keeps kind of going, because technically we could care about all the effects she's talking about, and they would be totally relevant if abortion isn't murder. But if you're appealing to all these things about, quality of life or all these sorts of things, I mean, if you were to ask, could you utilize these questions or these considerations to justify killing an infant or a toddler? She'd say no. So obviously, the relevance of those considerations hinges upon the status of the fetus. So we're back at the heart of the question. But I want to say that I don't.
She's begging the question. I would say she's saying that the effects of born human beings are more important than the effects on unborn human beings, which presupposes that they're less valuable, which is the whole debate. That is begging the question, what she's doing right there. And then it's just completely irrelevant. Like, if the majority of slave owners don't regret being slave owners, that doesn't mean slavery isn't wrong, right? And so in the same way, it doesn't matter if women regret having their abortions or not. It's irrelevant. But even on the pro-life side too, I think there's definitely a space for trying to humanize the fetus. But just because a fetus has toes and legs and eyes and ears, that actually doesn't make it valuable because it has those things, right? It's valuable because it's a human life. And so we do want to be careful in debates not to fall into the pro-choicers framework of, sort of an external type value. Oh, you're only valuable if you have this, this, and this. Versus the pro-life framework, which is, no, you are valuable because you are a human being, an alive human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, as you said, like, oh, sorry, you can play it. I can say this later.
Back to the Establishment Clause really quick, because even if you have a religious motivation behind what you believe, that still doesn't really, that's not establishing a religion. So there'd be a difference between, saying that we believe that it's murder because God says so, or murder is wrong, something along those lines. That wouldn't be an establishment of religion. If we established an abortion ban, that wouldn't require you to specifically be a Christian or specifically be a part of a religion.
Exactly, but now you have to follow your religious beliefs, even if you're not a Christian. That's the point. If you establish an abortion ban solely and specifically on the basis of my God told me that this is what is right and this is what should be, then now everyone who lives in that state with that abortion ban has to follow the rules of your God, regardless of whether or not they're Christian. So that's my issue.
I would say no matter how you argue it, you're still going to be coming from someone's worldview and someone's morality.
Absolutely. So come from a secular morality. Don't force your religion on other people. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I would say that most people do come from, I don't actually know of anyone who specifically uses religion to justify a pro-life argument.
Really? Yeah. I hear religion used to justify a pro-life argument quite constantly online, and it drives me crazy because I would really just like people to focus on secular ethics because that's what all of us are held to.
Secular ethics.
Don't follow yours. Follow my standard.
She says online. Like everything in me when she said this, I wanted to scream, "Get offline, girlfriend!" Like actually, like what? Who is passing these laws? And they're just saying because God told me this is why I'm pro-life. No one. So you might, if you hear that online from like a low IQ take, okay, great, congrats. I could find really low IQ takes on the pro-choice side too. Like, what is your point? You know? Like, because
Right.
no.
And
one-
also-
what is
for that.
secular morality? Please,
Exactly.
please define that for me. Because what she is saying is secular morality, she probably doesn't realize is influenced by the West and Christianity. The own values she holds, she doesn't even probably realize how influential Christianity is in those values.
That is my soapbox right there. That the culture that we live in today is inherently influenced by Christianity. So the secular culture is a Christian one, whether you realize it or not. Ironically enough.
I wonder what you would tell a pro-choice atheist.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the point
Good point.
is that she didn't prove her prompt. Her prompt is that it's unconstitutional to use religion to justify pro-life legislation. She appealed to the Establishment Clause. I thought that Julia brought up a really good point, and Maddie as well, that her argument, and Micah, you brought up a good point, is that I think she was mainly operating from the perspective of what should the Constitution say, rather than what does the Constitution say. And unfortunately, that's not the prompt that she wrote. So if we're asking, what does the Constitution say? In particular, what does this amendment mean in its application to our daily lives? Well, what's relevant is what was the intent of those who wrote that amendment? What was the original public meaning? That is you have to honestly make an argument for that way of interpreting the Constitution, and I do that in this debate. But one thing you could look to as evidence is what was common and established at the time when the Establishment Clause was written. And Julia brought up the example that in the first Congress, there was a national day of prayer and thanksgiving that was recognized prior to legislative sessions. They opened those legislative sessions up in prayer, which lends itself to the historical interpretation that the Establishment Clause was not written to mean. And she actually articulates this principle cleanly, which I appreciate, because in the first prompt, it was a bit muddled. But her principle is using any religion to justify any like legislative action or law is by nature unconstitutional. Number one, the people who wrote the Establishment Clause were doing that. So clearly, I think that's a pretty good argument that her way of interpreting the Constitution is not sound. And secondly, there are human rights campaigns throughout American history, namely the abolitionist movement, that did exactly that. So according to her own stated standard that it's wrong to use religion to justify legislative change, would she then say that the abolitionists who specifically and explicitly appeal to Christian virtue and scripture to advocate for the abolition of slavery, ultimately inspiring a constitutional change? Not only is that legislative change, but to the highest law of the land, were they acting unconstitutionally? That's actually really funny. But I just think that it's so muddled and confused and wrong. And I think that the biggest weakness is that she failed to really hone in on and make the case that she had the burden of proving. So, I thought the girls brought up good points there.
That she really didn't, I don't feel like she ended up proving any of her prompts. I really don't. But before we go on to the next prompt, I want to introduce another friend. I have so many amazing pro-life friends joining today on the live stream. I have my friend AJ Hurley with
What's up, guys?
Oh no, AJ's in here.
What's up, Micah? How you doing, pal?
Good, dude. Good.
Well, you know, around here, unlike Naima, at the end of the debate, Naima said, "I think this was a really productive conversation because men weren't involved."
Oh wow, goodness gracious!
Unlike Naima, I do believe men can be part of the conversation when it comes to the abortion debate. So I have some representation here from the manosphere.
Ask her how many Gazans she's adopted.
I'll mute and go to the next point, guys.
That even if science said that human life begins at fertilization.
Great. Okay. My next prompt is Republicans are pro-birth, not pro-life.
Hi, Naima. I'm Danielle.
Hi, I'm Nevaeh Souza. I'm Heather Lawless. Hi, I'm Eve.
Hi, Eve. And all of you, sorry, this is the last time I heard. Okay, so my point, Republicans are pro-birth and not pro-life. I don't think to be a pro-lifer, you have to be part of a particular party. Let's establish that first. I know that there are Democrats who are pro-life, right? I know that there's Republicans, MAGA, Nazis, all kind of people. But I do think that specifically the Republican Party, which has kind of claimed an identity of being pro-life, the vast majority of, conservative representatives in government claim to be pro-life, have not followed through on that belief based on the legislation that they've created, not only around abortion, but around pretty much every issue. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts about that.
Also, sorry, I skipped over. I was looking for in the last prompt. I also wanted to respond back to what I believe her name is Savannah. Savannah actually asked Naima at the very end of the last prompt. I skipped over it. She said, if we were to show you the evidence that says that 96% of biologists are agreeing that life begins at fertilization, then would you change your mind? And she says, no. She's like, nah, probably not. And it's like, okay, so why? This is a constant goalpost shifting that we see from the pro-choicers. Is once the pro-life position actually meets their criteria of what they were looking for, then they have to shift the goalpost, right? And so when we said, can we prove it to you? Would you change your mind? Yeah, probably not. Then why are we even talking about when life begins? Why did you even bring it up? If we were able to prove it, you don't care anyways. I want to hear some of your guys' thoughts, maybe like Taylor or AJ, someone who hasn't talked so much.
I thought what was interesting about this, what she's about to do here, was I think it was earlier. Sorry, I'm kind of coming in late here, but she had made the comments about like bodily autonomy and how women shouldn't be enslaved to have a child that they don't want, and that you're basically conscripting women against their will to take care of their children. And our response is no, like parents have a natural responsibility towards their children. But what's interesting here is what she's going to do, right? She's then turning it around on us and saying, because society doesn't have the collective responsibility, and because we aren't enslaving society to use their bodies against their will to take care of strangers' children, that somehow we're not pro-life and we shouldn't be against killing, we shouldn't allow the killing of all preborn innocent children. So it's interesting because we would say that no, like the law limits everyone's bodily autonomy, right? To the degree that we don't harm another person. But it's interesting how even she, according to her worldview, is now shifting the burden of responsibility from filial responsibility of a parent to a child to, okay, I don't have to be pro-life in that regard. But if you, stranger taxpayer, are not co-opted and enslaved by taking your money at the end of a gun to pay for strangers' children's, somehow you're not pro-life at all, and you should admit your hypocrisy and end up just conceding the point that we should kill innocent children.
Yeah, I feel like she's just doing the classic pro-choice thing of, solve every issue, or else, you can't stop us from killing our unborn children, which I think these women point out. But also what Shayla was saying about how, the pro-life movement sometimes will grant their positions. And I actually do this when we start talking about economics. And I ask her like point blank, hey, if we had every economic policy that you wanted, if we had, daycare, maternal leave, like literally everything you're sitting here advocating for, would you be okay then banning abortions? And she just says no. So it's like, what is this actually about for them, right? Like you have to get to the root of that.
Then it's not a choice. Women who are delivering children who are 1000% going to die now don't have a choice. They have to walk around with a dying baby inside of them and deliver that baby, which is a horrific, very traumatic event physically, and then watch that baby die.
Delivering
if the baby is already going to die post-birth, why should they not have the choice to abort it?
Because delivering their baby and getting to say goodbye to their baby and hold their baby and bond with their baby is healthier than killing their baby.
But do you believe that it's not killing their baby?
Yes,
it's already going to die.
But it's alive now. It's alive now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you believe that it should be a choice to carry a fatal fetal anomaly to term?
I do not believe that a woman should ever have the choice to kill her child.
So how is it pro-life if the fetus is going to die regardless?
Well, you have.
I want her to answer. I'm sorry, my love. I really want you to answer.
A woman should never have the choice to kill her child.
But how is it pro-life if there is no life?
It is alive.
But it's going to die.
So if you got cancer, should I just kill you now because you're going to die? You might die.
No, but if I had a...
Did you know we all are going to die?
Question.
Yeah. Like the right question. Guys, I need you to know this. None of us are alive right now because we're going to die.
We're all going to die.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
I could not believe when she said that. I'm so surprised they don't have the B-roll of me being like, what are you saying? She actually, her question, how is it killing if it's already going to die? Going to die, as in it's not dead yet, so it's killing. That's actually inserting the question that you asked.
And she's admitting it's alive. And again, she's
And
admitting
you
it's
know
alive.
what? that logic justifies euthanasia, which is another hot topic that's probably going to become even more relevant as time passes.
The clear symmetry breaker, however, with euthanasia, and I mean, obviously, in some cases, this is, it's contested that it's not there, but the clear symmetry breaker between euthanasia and fatal fetal abnormalities is the lack of consent. So it's even worse than that. It's even worse than that, because what they appeal to is the fact that, this person's going to die anyways, and they should be allowed to die on their terms. But what she's saying is, no, this person's going to die anyway. Watching them die and suffer will be such an inconvenience to the people around us. Therefore, they get to die on our terms, on the person's terms who is responsible for them. And the other thing is, too, is she kept saying that it's horrible to make a woman birth a fetus or birth a baby who is going to die. But at that point, because she's talking about fatal fetal abnormalities that are found out later during pregnancy. Obviously, the McKenna West story, which is very big on the internet right now, is a great example. The baby she was carrying, she's a surrogate, was found out to have a heart condition at the 20-week scan, which is very typical of these more kind of egregious abnormalities or conditions that are discovered. She was asked to have an abortion. She refused. And so when you have an abortion at that stage, there is no way around giving birth. There's just if a woman's getting an abortion past 20 weeks, she is giving birth, period. The question is she giving birth to a baby who is inevitably going to die, or is she giving birth to a dead baby? And Yasmin brought this up too. Yasmin was the girl in the purple dress at the beginning. Yasmin was 25 weeks pregnant, I believe, when we filmed the debate. And she kept saying, like, at that stage, if she were to, obviously it's very horrible for her to think about, but all she thinks about now, obviously being pregnant, is what does her baby look like? What is he gonna talk like? What is he gonna have, her eyes or McGarren's eyes? Is he gonna be blonde or is he gonna have brown hair? All she can think about is what her baby will look like. The idea that if you have an abortion at that stage, she will never know that, because the baby would be delivered in pieces, literally limb from limb. That is how an abortion happens at that stage, versus the life-affirming treatment that happens in hospice for a baby that is diagnosed with a fatal abnormality. The woman holds the baby. They get to say goodbye to the baby. But, Heather brought this up, and I do think it's important to talk about what hospice care, what it entails. But the fact that it's better or more healing for the woman actually isn't the reason why it would be wrong to have an abortion at that stage, because the alternative is more healing for her. Even though I would agree that that's true, the reason why it would be wrong is because it's still killing. It's still murder. You're still taking an innocent human life. And the fact that that life is going to die anyways is not a sound justification for taking life, because, as Heather pointed out, there are many people who are diagnosed with fatal conditions, and yet we would not kill them. So clearly what matters here is that this baby feels like an inconvenience to me and is in a powerless, vulnerable position, and I therefore feel justified in taking its life on the basis that it will die. But that's just, if you were to actually isolate that variable and apply it to another born human being, clearly that logic doesn't hold. So it's just a ridiculous standard.
I'm gonna move on to the next prompt, but yes, just to be very clear.
Can I say one thing on that real quick, just because I used to take care of these babies. So I was a neonatal respiratory therapist for almost nearly a decade at UCLA, and I had many cases where we would have a child with trisomy 18 or some other genetic abnormality most of the cases that we'd seen, at least because I was working in the ICU. These babies would come out and we would take care of them, and sometimes they would be put on palliative care immediately. And just this crazy, insane notion that because I might die at some unforeseen future time that we all don't know, right? Granted, many of these children that are deemed incompatible, quote unquote, with life, go on to live 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, like trisomy 18, right? I have a patient right now that mom just cared enough to literally give her the care that she deserved instead of treating her like trash, to be violently dismembered in the womb. That child is 6 years old now, right? But that child was among a class of human beings that were considered incompatible with life, because what really undergirds this entire movement is such a eugenic, dysgenic way of looking at human beings. But just that, I guess, just throw this out there. It's like, you have two choices, right? This baby might die. So let this baby, deliver this baby, put it in its loving mother's arms, and let it die peacefully with palliative care, us taking care of that child, giving it what it needs to comfortably die in peace. Or the alternative is violently pulling the arms and legs of this child and crushing its skull to death. And somehow the latter is seen as compassionate. I will never understand it.
It's such a farce. It's such a farce. And I love when and I know that people like Naima hate when we use brutal language like that, because they're like, this is just, emotional manipulation that you're using with a baby. You're talking about the arms and legs being ripped off. That is what is happening. And it's important for us as pro-lifers to use this language, because it's not an over-exaggeration. It is truth language, right? And it is a reminder of what they want to push aside, what they want us to not talk about because of how inconvenient it would be for their position. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next prompt, just because I think there's a lot more substance in these last two for sure.
We love that woman right there on the screen.
My next prompt is
my mom.
Abortion bans violate women's constitutional rights.
Hi, I'm Lydia.
I'm Erin. I'm Michelle.
I'm Liana.
Okay, so my prompt: abortion bans violate women's constitutional rights. Obviously, I'm referring to the 14th Amendment, life, liberty, with due process, right? So that's the rights that I mainly focused on in this debate. Now, I do believe that a woman has those rights above the rights and the needs of a fetus, because a fetus is relying on her body for nutrients and is dependent on her. So her inalienable rights take priority in this circumstance.
Do you think a child's dependency on their parents to survive should be a death sentence?
Well, here's the thing. A child doesn't simply depend on their parents. While children are more dependent on adults than a full adult like you or me, they're not dependent on one specific person. So if an adult, right, believes I no longer have the capacity to care for this child, they have options. So their freedom and liberty is not being infringed upon.
So what about in other countries where there's sadly not adoption, no formula, in remote villages where there's no other breastfeeding moms? If a mother has a newborn, the newborn is solely dependent on her body. Do you think she should be able to kill her newborn since it's solely dependent on her body for survival?
I'm sorry, what?
In remote countries, sadly, I wish this wasn't the case, but there is a lack of formula, adoption, resources, other breastfeeding moms to take care of babies. If a mother has a newborn baby, the baby is solely dependent on her body, her breast milk to survive. She can't just eat a steak. So should she be able to kill her newborn baby since it's fully dependent on her body to survive?
If there were no other breastfeeding mothers and
this is sadly a common thing.
I mean, sadly, I think the infant mortality rates in those places are just a lot higher, right? But in that instance, I would absolutely say she should have the right to get an abortion before that child is born if she knows that she does not have the resources to care for that.
Should she be able to kill her newborn baby, since that newborn baby is equally dependent on her body as a preborn baby who's also dependent on her body?
It's still not equally dependent on her body. It's just dependent. I'm not really.
It is. She's alone.
What place in the world are you saying there are zero other adults who can care?
I've done a lot of work, sadly, in other countries where this is the case. I visited these remote villages and tried to get supplies and help for these people in need. And it is sadly a thing. I mean, even here in America, a mom could get snowed in alone with her newborn baby. By your logic, she should be able to kill her newborn baby since it's fully dependent on her body alone.
That's a temporary condition.
And so is pregnancy.
That's not, well, no.
A temporary condition.
It's a temporary.
Wait, you guys, you have.
And how they really are looking at this. Oh, if she gets unable to finish, she should just kill it prematurely. Like, might as well just get rid of it. Like, you're seeing all of her sick beliefs actually come out in her language right here.
You also have to remember that Naima does have a point in which she would like to ban abortion. She is fine banning abortion post 24 weeks. So keep in mind that her argument completely falls apart because to be consistent, she would have to have absolutely no limits on abortion. If she's going to argue the bodily autonomy, she has to say that abortion is fine till 9 months. And as Lydia's trying to prove, maybe even past birth, right?
Exactly.
So you have to always push them on the fact that they themselves have bans and why her point does not translate to her post 24 week ban.
Yeah, because the question you could ask her in turn is, okay, wait, hold on. You're not for forcing women early on to against their bodily autonomy, but why should you force a woman at 24, 25, 26 up to term to force her against her? If it's her bodily autonomy rights are the thing that gives her the right to kill her child, why are you then forcing her to do that after, right?
Right.
Yeah, and she would say
somewhere in this exchange, she did say something along the lines of, well, she would have already had plenty of options up until that point. So basically, it's once again, it's not consistent because it's like if bodily autonomy is a reason why, she doesn't need to have any excuses for why she'd be able to opt out. But she says, well, if it's third trimester, they already had plenty of time to do it, and if they haven't done that, then they need to have the consequence of having the baby.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in there. I think I remember when she's getting pressed on this, her saying that it is the fact that prior to viability, because she sees viability at that 23, 24 week mark, which is why she's okay with abortion bans after viability, because she says that the fact that prior to viability, which she defines as the ability of a human fetus to sustain its own life outside of its mother's womb, she says that prior to that fact, that baby is exclusively dependent upon the mother's body. And therefore, because abortion, she says, is about a right for a pregnant woman to not be pregnant, a right to withhold her maternal bodily resources at whatever point she wants, therefore, abortion is this constitutional right. What Lydia is saying is she's giving her a thought experiment, a hypothetical, in which she is showing, okay, on this principle, if it is the fact that this baby is exclusively dependent on this mother's body for this temporary period of time, imagine there is a remote village, or imagine you are snowed into a cabin, and the only person who is able to feed a newborn for 9 months, let's say, is this one woman, and she must use her body to do it, and she must also give bodily resources, bodily fluid. She must use breast milk in order to feed this baby. So in this case, you have met that condition of exclusive dependency, which Naima articulates basically earlier in the debate, is what establishes a right to abortion, which she sees is a constitutional right to just not be pregnant and exercise of bodily autonomy. So according to her logic, if we follow it through cleanly, would you then say that woman has a right to withhold her bodily resources and allow that child to starve to death? One, morally speaking, we would intuitively regard that as egregious. Secondly, legally, I think because the law tracks with what is moral, for not always, but oftentimes in common law, we would recognize that that woman has committed a crime, that she is guilty of negligence, especially if that is her own biological child, because common law also recognizes an added layer of duty when you are a child's parent, right? So the maternal relationship there is extraordinarily important in terms of the legal aspect. But there are two parts of this debate. This debate's really about what does the Constitution authorize states to do? Her claim is that abortion bans are unconstitutional. Lydia is pushing her on her philosophical definition or her philosophical defense of bodily autonomy. And as you can see very clearly, when pressed on her principle, she's not able to follow it through to its logical conclusion. So just to be very clear, if you hold Naima's position, logic dictates and logical consistency requires that you accept the conclusion that a mother who is stranded in the woods with her infant newborn on the basis of bodily autonomy should be allowed to allow that child to starve to death if she so chooses. And if you have a problem with that morally and think that legally she should be prohibited from doing that, congratulations, you have now arrived at the pro-life position.
But not only that, but like even abortion is a step further, right? Because abortion isn't just merely not feeding someone. Abortion would be akin to like this mother. You arrive 9 months later at the cabin, and this child has been completely either poisoned to death or dismembered. So it's not even that analogy. I don't think really equates to what we're talking about with the intentional killing of unborn children.
A fetus is permanently incapable of sustaining itself until it is viable, right?
Well,
so
viability is
pregnancy by definition.
Okay, so 100 years ago, viability was about 30 weeks. Now, obviously, it's at 2021. Hopefully, another 100 years, it'll be even earlier. Are you saying we should base human rights on how good our medical advancements are?
Should we base human rights on how good our medical advancements
are? Permanently incapable.
Because if you're in a remote village in which there's zero resources.
Until. That's so funny. She just, like, literally within the sentence contradicted herself. She said it's permanently incapable until. Well, then it's not permanent. That's
the chances are that child is going to die without you having to specifically.
She just breastfeeds the baby. She takes care of it.
But if she doesn't have the resources, like if she doesn't have any food, then
well,
she
has food for herself. You can't feed a newborn steak, right? Like newborns have to survive off breast milk at least for the first 6 months, and so she is fully the only one that is able to care for this baby. And by your logic, you said the baby is.
I'm not really buying this hypothetical. I'm sorry.
Why? But you literally said a preborn baby. The reason why we can kill that preborn human being. No, but it's even reality too. It's a real situation.
But why don't we focus on reality? And why don't
it is reality?
I mean, those people aren't like they don't follow our constitution, right?
You can't answer it because you're realizing that it's defeating your logic. Because your whole
argument doesn't defeat my logic because we're talking about constitutional rights of humans in this country.
Yes, and actually bring it back to the Constitution very quickly.
Absolutely, I would much rather talk about that.
My question is, where does the word abortion appear in the Constitution?
Where does the word? It doesn't.
It doesn't. So where are you grounding your right to abortion in the 14th Amendment?
In the 14th Amendment, the right to life and liberty.
Okay, so why are you defining life and liberty to mean a right to abortion? Because on the face of it, it seems like life seems to support our position. So why does liberty mean a right to abortion? What are you using to interpret the Constitution?
Well, because liberty is what one does with their body, right?
That's not a constitutional. You're not interpreting.
Yes, that is a freedom. I mean, how do you define
what is the role of a judge in your opinion?
What do you define liberty to be? Well, a judge is due process, right?
No,
so that's passed. You've now passed due process.
A judge's
Wait, can you pause this right
there? A judge's role is not to write the law. So does that mean
She just said a judge is due process. I just wanted to flag that. I just watched that today and I was like, what do you mean a judge is due process? A judge upholds due process. A judge is not due process. But I think right here we're getting to the point where, you know, we're going over from the how do I think the law should be written, what do I think lawmakers should do, over to what does the law actually say? And so, you know, this is a bit of a nuanced discussion, but just to start off, I mean, important for framing and for understanding the position. There are people who agree with Naima's conclusion, which is abortion should be legal. There are pro-choice legal scholars who agree with her conclusion, but who disagree that the Constitution protects that right. So there's a separate question here that has to do with interpreting the Constitution, and that's kind of a descriptive question. The question is not what should the Constitution say, what should the law be, what should policymakers consider, what law should they pass? The question is specifically, what does the 14th Amendment say, and does it apply in this context to a right to abortion? And I do not think that Naima does a good job of doing that, because what does she do? She appeals to the 14th Amendment and she just says, well, life and liberty. Oh, okay, so if we're going to just do a face value interpretation of the text, immediately what do we see? Life, and we see liberty. Okay, life lends itself much more clearly to supporting our position because it's intuitive and it's explicit. Life. Liberty, as is noted in the Dobbs decision, actually has over 200 definitions. So now we are confronted with an interpretational challenge, right? Why should we believe that liberty includes a right to abortion? And that's what I think she fails to elaborate upon. She keeps offering philosophical kind of definition. She says that liberty is bodily autonomy, defining it to mean basically whatever you want to do with your body. But that's actually not true according to the 14th Amendment, number one, because it says with due process of the law, which means that these things actually can be deprived so long as due process is given, which is why people can go to jail. It's why their liberty can be deprived, because as long as due process is given to them, now their right to liberty is deprived because they've lost that right because of a crime that they've committed. That's why people can be subject to the death penalty. Their right to life is deprived so long as due process is followed. And so I think that the clear question we should be asking is, how did those who wrote the 14th Amendment interpret life, liberty, and property under due process of the law? What did they interpret that to mean? One thing you can do to find evidence to lend itself to one interpretation over another is to say, or to look at what laws existed at the time. And one thing I note here is that a super majority of states, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, had laws banning abortion. So clearly, if the 14th Amendment was written to ground a right to abortion, they wouldn't have had laws banning abortion, a super majority of states. So she does not establish that the 14th Amendment does justify right to abortion if you're going to take this way of interpreting the Constitution seriously. What she does argue for is that it should. But that's a very, very different argument from it actually does. And the historical record does not establish that whatsoever.
That's good. No, I think that's such a great point. There's on that, just in case you guys were, or anybody listening wants to read more about that, there's a guy named Josh Craddock, who's a Harvard legal scholar, who wrote his dissertation on this question and goes through all of, like, from William Blackstone's commentary to all of the founders, all of the legal jurisprudence of the time of the founding, to show that they all recognized that children in the womb were valuable and persons from the moment that a child could be detected. The issue then, and a lot of people will point to these laws and say, oh, well, all said when the child is stirring in the womb. Well, the only reason for that was simply because they didn't have modern technological advancements to even detect pregnancy. So the only way that they could tell a woman was pregnant in the 1700s was to literally just wait till you could feel a baby stirring in the womb. So from that second on, that child was considered a legal person and protected under the due process clause of the 5th Amendment, now the 14th Amendment now. But even if that wasn't the case, the specific question, guys, that was asked is already been answered in Dobbs. Remember, like, the Dobbs decision literally answered this question. The Supreme Court said, and I quote, The Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. The decision to regulate abortion has been returned to the states and their elected representatives. So the fact that she's using this is completely not in confluence with the Supreme Court's decision on this at all.
Yeah, and she would just say that she disagrees with Dobbs. But what I think is really important to recognize is that even pro-choice scholars disagreed with Roe v. Wade. And may I just add to that? I'm not sure if she's aware of this. In fact, I was only made aware of this very recently when I was doing research for this prop. But even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, patron saint of abortion rights, maintained that Roe v. Wade was mistaken in several ways. And one of the ways she thinks it was mistaken was because it actually slowed down democratic change. Because what happened is it removed the topic from democratic debate by kind of finding this right to abortion in the substantive due process deliberation, or it's kind of a long story and kind of complicated how they did it. But there are pro-choice legal scholars who said, yeah, I agree with abortion. I think it should be legal, but certainly not through this media or not through these means. So I think that's important to recognize as well, is that they even agree with us on this issue.
Better than abortion. So yes, we don't want them to seek abortion because abortion is going to hurt them. It's going to give the death penalty to their child for the crimes of their father.
Sorry, we're going back and forth. I'll think about you for the 10 minutes. But to your point, I mean, Tennessee tried to propose a law in which women who seek abortive care or doctors who perform an abortion get the death penalty. So if a doctor tried to perform an abortion for a woman who was raped and he did that, he could have potentially died if that bill was passed, right? He could have had a life imprisonment, potentially death penalty. That's just unconstitutional, guys. Like, I mean, there's no way to cut that. There's no way to make that look good. But I would love to hear from you guys.
So I think the example you gave of the woman who was shot in the stomach and charred, I mean, that is just such an obvious example of miscarriage of justice. Like, I think
miscarriage.
Like, if that was
Let's go ahead and pull this up because this was one of those instances where she said that a woman basically was charged with killing her baby because a man or someone shot her in the stomach, and then she was charged, right, with that murder. Well, when she said that, sometimes when you're debating pro-choicers and you're talking to pro-choicers, they'll say something that a case that you're not aware of, but your head tilts. You're like, I have a feeling you're not explaining all the details here. I have a feeling that this story has a little bit more than what you are actually leading on. So I want to share my screen really quick with you guys. So all of our husbands who are watching, my husband, Liana's husband, Yasmin's husband, Micah was in the room. All of us, when they heard that, they instantly started
immediately
going on. And so I'll go ahead and share really quick my screen. But basically, it is this case right here. And what you see is that, she's making it seem like there's a woman, like I said, who she just got shot in the stomach.
Just me, or I can't hear shit.
What?
We can hear. I think it's you, Micah.
Okay.
There's a woman who just was pregnant and she just got shot one day, and then she got charged with murder just for being pregnant. That is the way that she presented this story. Well, let me show you guys. Let me pull it up. This is the case, okay? Right here. This woman, if you read the full story of what actually happened here, you see Marsha Jones, she's pregnant and she initiates a fight with she's the baby mama, and she initiates a fight with the girlfriend of the father, and they get into a fight, and what ends up happening is at some point self-defense happens and she shoots Marsha, the mother, in the stomach, and the fetus dies. The baby loses its life. Well, what they end up finding is that this was a mother who incited violence, and she's being held accountable now for, yes, someone used self-defense and shot the fetus, but you as the mother, because you incited violence, you are responsible for not caring for this fetus. You decided to attack someone and put the life of your child in danger, right? These ended up being dropped, these cases, but it's just so interesting to me that she didn't talk about how this mother is the one who started the violence. She doesn't talk about how the charges were dropped. She doesn't talk about any of these details. She just is, like I said, very conveniently leaving out these details to make it sound like, innocent pregnant mother was just walking down the street. She got shot, lost the baby, and she's charged with manslaughter.
So I think Micah's trying to get added back, by the way.
Just trying to get back in. So here's the other thing on this, guys. Like I see this all the time, and it's so disingenuous because I have on my phone, just because I talk to people on the street all the time and have these conversations, I have screenshotted the pro-life laws of every single state that have abortion bans. And they all allow you to get an abortion, one, if your life's in danger, but two, none of them criminalize the mother for incurring an abortion herself, right? It's always punishing the abortionists themselves. So even in, what state was this, Shayla?
Angel, do you remember what state this was in?
I think it's in Alabama.
So in Alabama, a woman in the 9th month of pregnancy can take abortion pills like misoprostol every 2 hours until her baby is expelled, and do so in front of a police officer, and then nothing will happen to her because it's completely legal in all 50 states, provided you self-induce abortions. So this idea that some chick, basically got shot and then charged for the harm done to her baby in the womb is bonkers and ridiculous, because she can electively terminate her own child in that state with full legal immunity, provided she does it herself.
And one more thing, just very, very quickly, if she wanted to be totally logically consistent with saying that, this mother in this instance, she was inciting violence and is being held accountable for putting that fetus in danger, even if she were to provide all the context and then disagree with it, I think in order to be logically consistent, she should be okay with pregnant women drinking, doing drugs, and doing whatever they want to do, like while they're pregnant, even if that endangers the baby. And all of a sudden, when we talk about that, they're very uncomfortable with that idea, because the reality is we recognize that there are duties that pregnant women have to their children. It's like really just as simple as that.
Actually, I think if that is actually the details of it, and I claim ignorance on that, I don't know the story, but that would be I think a situation we would all agree, like, that is horrific, and the woman went through a shooting and lost her baby, so she should not be prosecuted for anything like that. I think, of course, these cases of rape, and you brought up the 12-year-old with incest. Now, we know these things happen, but we know that the vast majority of abortions, and by vast majority I mean like 99%, are done by women who are making the choice to do that because they got themselves pregnant. And as someone who, I'm a mother of 5, so I know how to get pregnant. Everyone knows how to get pregnant. And when we make the choice to participate in that, then we realize that we are putting ourselves in the position of pregnancy. I do like what you said about fathers are oftentimes, you brought up something about fathers, and I really like that you did that, because that, I think, is oftentimes not talked about. And I myself was in a crisis pregnancy at 17 years old, and all of the focus is on me, and all of it is like, in that, it's not expected that he's going to necessarily have to do anything. And I think you're right, when it comes to pregnancy, women bear the bulk of what it takes to bring a child into the world. We all agree with that, which is why we think women should be protected when they are pregnant and things like that. But I don't see how you framed it was the state's imposing on us as women, like myself. When I was 17, found out I was pregnant. The state isn't forcing me to have a child. I got pregnant. And what I see the state's responsibility and the Constitution's is to protect life, protect liberty. So I had the liberty to make a choice before I got pregnant.
Yep.
Let's talk really quick about the cases of rape, and then also about accountability, how basically allowing abortions is incentivized by the rapist, and also the fathers who don't want to take responsibility. I'd like to hear from you guys on that, but whatever.
Well, real quick before that too, I think, well, my mom did a good job, I think, of when you hear a story that you've never heard of and how to respond to that mid-debate. You claim ignorance, and then you agree with the conclusion, because if that was legitimate, if she was portraying the story accurately, then yeah, we would all agree that would be a miscarriage of justice. But then you move along into actual logic and argumentation, which I think my mom did well.
Yeah, I want to hear from you guys specifically on the cases of rape that were brought up, which I love that Micah's mom said, yeah, this is not the vast majority, like 99% are not that it is women who know what they're doing, and they are pregnant. And then also, I want to talk about, like I said, the incentive that rapists and also fathers who don't want to take accountability for their child, what this really means if we continue to advocate for abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually rape is always brought up, like almost every single time that I interact or debate with people online on this stuff. it's just brought up. And I mean, the simple question to ask them is, okay, if I granted you this exception, would you be fine with banning the rest of abortions? And the answer is obviously no for them. So it has nothing to do with the actual topic. They just use it because emotionally and rhetorically it's very powerful for people. And so I mean that's a good way to handle it. And then yeah, I mean, bringing up dads, it's funny when pro-choicers do this. I don't know if has any pro-choicer ever interacted with a pro-lifer that said, yeah, the men shouldn't have any responsibility, because like every single pro-lifer I've ever talked to or know of has said, yes, let's get the men responsible. Like, absolutely, we totally agree on that. So I don't know. It just feels like common pro-choice talking points that actually don't really hold up in any pro-life debate I've ever seen.
And you saw this all throughout this debate, that you saw her acting like we don't care about the life of the mother, right? It's like if we talk to any pro-lifer, they're going to know that we care about the child and the mother. You know, actually, we think that men should take responsibility. If you know any pro-lifer, you're going to say, no, we want the rapists to be held accountable. We want the fathers to be held accountable for the child that they've, you know, taken part of creating. Like, she's using these talking points against us, and it's coming across that she's never actually talked to a pro-lifer.
Right.
So what's interesting, what I find interesting is we're talking about the life, like she talked about the life of the mother and all that stuff. I have something, like, I call it a double whammy. I have PCOS, and I also have factor V, which is a blood clotting disorder. So it's like I'm automatically, every single doctor, my OB has said the minute you get pregnant, you're gonna have to be on shots in order to save your life and the baby's life. So I'm automatically considered high risk pregnancy. So I think I have the ability to speak on something like this. They have ways, like medical technology and advancements have made it so far as, guess what? By the time, like, it's actually going to be life-threatening, if they don't have a way to prevent it, like blood clots or something like that, that's going to be life-threatening to the mother, then by the time they get there, the baby's already far enough and to be able to deliver it. And the baby, the majority of the time, is going to be fine, and the mother is going to be fine. So there's no medical need that, oh my goodness, the mother's life is in danger. Second, when we talk about rape and we talk about all of this, why are we subjecting a woman to a second act of trauma? Abortion is an unnatural process. The female body, when pregnancy happens, is the body is closed. That's why dilation happens, in order to open the vagina and to make it better to push out. Your body prepares to give birth and prepares to open up. Sometimes it takes a long time to prepare to open up. Why are we advocating for a procedure that is forcefully going in and destroying the baby, something that's unnatural? At least birth is a natural process the female body was created to do. Abortion is not that at all. Why are we advocating to put this second act of trauma on the female? And it's not the point I want to emphasize too. It's not going to unrape a woman. It's not going to, it's doing justice to the rapist, and it's making Planned Parenthood, which, by the way, she talked about color and race, and oh my goodness, Shayla's so racist, blah, 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 blah. The number one client is the Black community. Margaret Sanger hated the Black community. So you're advocating for the destruction of your own people. So it's just so hypocritical. And these points, that's what I would have brought up and kind of talked to her. And you're so pro-woman and you're so pro-women's rights, but you're literally okay with them giving her a second act of trauma when you're not even going to be able to tell how a baby was conceived, if it was conceived in a loving marriage or if it was conceived by a rapist.
Do you guys know it? Do you guys know if Naima is against the death penalty, like capital punishment?
Probably.
Right. So isn't it kind of funny that, like, she'd be against giving the death penalty to actually rapists themselves, but she'll give it to an innocent child?
Yeah.
I mean, talk about hypocrisy, right? Talk about irony there. And I mean, to Chloe's point, that's such a good point. It's like, have we ever stopped to think and do research as to whether or not abortion after rape actually produces positive outcomes? Well, it turns out actually every single study that's ever been done on this overwhelmingly shows that every metric, whether it be suicidation, drug addiction, self-harm, alcoholism, depression, anxiety, just through the roof, and negatively affects a woman, skyrockets these detriments after abortion. And just even this insane notion, guys, like, have we ever stopped to think that the treatment for a girl that has been violated in one of the most intricate and sensitive places ever, maybe the solution isn't to go violate her again with surgical instruments and hack up her child and call it healthcare? Hello? This is just it's like it's just passed off without thinking about it.
You don't understand, AJ. 99% of women who have abortions don't regret it. So you need to believe all women, women with their own bodies. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious what stats she's getting to that one too.
Really quickly on the paternal duty point, like setting aside the rape question, I just think it's really interesting that they'll talk about kind of absent fathers and how, like men aren't involved when it's actually their logic. I would say that has created a world like that. The entire the principle that they defend as advocates for abortion is that there is no duty this woman has to her child, especially in cases where she has engaged in an action that reasonably leads to the consequence or to the existence of a child who is uniquely and exclusively dependent upon her. So in the vast majority of cases, pregnancy happens as a result of the conscious actions and decisions of two adults who engaged in behavior that reasonably leads to that result that creates a person who is uniquely and exclusively dependent upon them. If a man were to go before a court of law and plead ignorance and say to the judge, I don't want to pay child support because when I engaged in sex with this woman, I actually was not intending to get her pregnant, that judge would say, did you have sex with her? Any reasonable adult understands that this would lead to pregnancy reasonably, that there is a reasonable risk of that. And it is on account of that reasonable person standard, because we understand intuitively the design of sex is to lead to pregnancy, he would be held responsible to pay child support. So a society that erodes away at maternal duty by establishing abortion as a right inevitably also erodes away at paternal duty, and therefore creates a society within which it is acceptable for fathers to not pay child support and to be absent and to totally abdicate on their responsibility for the child that they are responsible for creating.
Amen.
We only have a little bit of time left, so we're gonna get to the last prompt because I do think that there's probably I'd say this is one of the juiciest prompts, honestly, when it comes to what really came out of it. So I'll go ahead and
to add real quick, for people watching, you should watch the full thing, and then you should watch who she chooses at the very end, because I'm so thankful that Anne was there, and I'm so thankful that she was chosen at the end, because it came out that Naima was a victim, and then if you know Anne's story, her mom was a victim, got pregnant with her through the rape, chose to keep Anne, and so Anne just has an amazing story and was able to address Naima where she was at just so beautifully. And so it is a good reminder to definitely debate the arguments for sure, but also be aware of the person that you're debating too, and that they might have they might be bringing up rape in such a common way or in a visceral way because they were a victim themselves too. So it's a good reminder. But yeah, get to the last.
Other than trans men, shout out, and MBs, shout out. For racist, Black women are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth. Black women are also more likely to seek abortive care. The rate in which Black women get abortions is much higher than the rate of white women. So this legislation impacts us much more directly. And for classist, Roughly 42% of women who seek abortive care live below the federal poverty line, right? So that means if you're in a single parent household, you're making $15,000 a year or less. The average cost to raise a child in this country, lowest number is $17,000, right? So if we know that almost half the women who seek abortions literally make less than it costs to raise a child every year, they are being unfairly targeted by these bans. So those are my claims, and if you want to address any one of them, go for it.
I would say that abortion is racist because in 1939, Margaret Sanger started eugenics by trying to eliminate the Black race. Children that were Jewish children, children that were handicapped, Black children, she literally targeted the inner cities to obliterate the Black race.
I mean, well, like, I don't really know about her specifically, but I'm talking about the laws. Okay, well, I'm talking about the laws that currently exist. These bans know that Black women seek abortive care. Legislatures know these things, but they defund SNAP, which Black women use more than other groups, right? Especially Black families. They defund Medicare. They defund Medicare, but yet they ban abortion. So now these families, they know specifically are Black, who need this care, are without care. And so they are forced to foot the bill of a child that they don't want.
Naomi, I have a clarifying question just on your worldview. Would you be, and this will relate to your prompt, but are you interested in banning abortion post-viability?
I said that. Yeah, at 24 weeks. Yes. At 24 weeks, the only exception is that the mother's life is at risk.
Okay, so
by
your own logic, would then those later term abortions also be racist since Black women would need them more often?
I'm confused.
So if you're saying that abortion bans are racist because Black women seek abortions more, yes, am I getting okay? And then also by your logic, when you want to ban abortion post 24 weeks, would those bans also not be racist?
So did you hear the singular exception that I gave?
Life of the mother, but that's not the majority of the reason why Black women are seeking abortions.
Okay, but if a Black woman's life was at risk, then I would support her having an abortion after 24.
Wouldn't you want to protect those Black fetuses post viability?
Post viability? Well, I said after viability, the only exception is if the mother's life is at risk.
Including
as I said.
Your logic just doesn't
She's
track.
unable to answer a question.
Taylor, great job. You did such a great job there.
Okay,
You
I fell in love
exposed
with
the
Taylor.
inconsistency.
I didn't know Taylor prior to this. This is my first time ever meeting Taylor, seeing Taylor in action. And as soon as she put together, piecing all of Naima's scattered, talking points and trying to show her, your logic isn't tracking here. I was like, I need to be friends with this woman. She's so good at, because even it's hard in the moment to try to remember all of the things that she said and how it doesn't follow logically, and to actually put it into words. And Taylor was able to do it in such a seamless way. Taylor, I want to hear your thoughts, but I just want you to know I absolutely fell in love with you.
Oh, wow. Well, the feeling's mutual. All these ladies did such a phenomenal job. And it's true. Like, I think one of the frustrating parts of these debate formats is, like, obviously you are fenced in by your specific prompt. So again, like, we have to work on her presuppositions about how she hasn't even answered, like, what is in the womb, what makes a human. So you have to kind of, like, bypass that because you do have such a short amount of time. And then it's hard to keep a line of logic going because there's other people that want to speak and you don't want to, like, take up the whole time. But yeah, I mean, it's just such a clear logical inconsistency, which I don't even think she tracked it during the debate. Like, I think she just kept getting confused by her own, like, logic. And that's what happens when she diverts, her own, she has a million goalposts that she's trying to, jump between.
Exactly.
And confusing herself. So I was trying to keep her on track about just saying, well, you yourself want to ban abortion. So if by that logic, it is racist because one group seeks them more than others, then it's always going to be racist, right? It's just an absurd claim to begin with. So
how did
you
you guys
did a great
sit in
job
there?
setting that up with questions? Like you
Yeah.
just ask questions and then you let her.
You have to make her
own logic
see it herself.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you guys sit there without not like driving yourself mad with just like not being able to just call her out? Like, dude, you are moving the goalpost every 5 seconds and you're a red herring machine. Every time you ask a question, she pivots to something else and then pivots to something else that has nothing to do with the question you asked.
I wish they showed more of us, like, reacting, because my face the whole time was like,
okay.
We were
so
reacting. Our faces were not like, oh, calm, cool, like
Okay, because you appear so, yeah. Okay.
All abortions should be banned except for life of the mother, right? Because you're claiming that it would be racist if we banned abortion in total for the sole reason that Black women seek abortions more, but then you're kind of backtracking your logic when you want to ban abortion post 24 weeks. So by your logic, those would also be racist abortion bans.
Why that? You got to connect that one.
So maybe you can tell me why you think they're racist, just simply for the fact that Black women need them more and they would be more affected by the
Black
bans?
women are being disproportionately denied care.
Care of what?
Equal intent of the law.
Yes, abortion is medical
Okay, so then that's an assertion you have to prove that it's medical care.
It is medical care.
But so are you saying for only the life of
It's
the
a
mother
medical
then?
procedure.
You're saying it's medical procedure only for the life of the mother.
At 24 weeks post viability, the exception is life of the mother.
Correct.
Yes, before 24 weeks, abortion good.
Are you in the position of banning abortion post 24 weeks in the case of rape as well?
In the case of rape and incest, yes, I think that was the Roe.
Even if the mother's 10, 12, 14?
I go by the Roe definition. Yes, every woman should have access to an abortion up until 24 weeks. Viability.
Now,
yes.
why do you?
Abortion doesn't take away rape.
abortion doesn't take away rape, but the impact of having to get raped and then raise your rapist baby and also deliver your rapist baby is profoundly more than the impact of getting raped and then subsequently being able to.
Well, can I interject about the wording, because we all respected we won't use the baby, right? We're going to say fetus. I would respectfully ask that we don't refer to a child conceived in rape as a rapist baby. I was a child conceived in rape, and I'm way more than a rapist baby.
I mean, okay, I wouldn't use that
acknowledge that?
specifically for you, but like it's not necessarily scientifically incorrect.
Wow, it was such a
Yeah.
great moment.
Yeah,
man.
it was such a good moment because once again, like, going back to all of the stuff that Naima was saying before we even walked into the room that day, it's so clear. It's so clear that she actually doesn't have respect for pro-lifers. It's so absolutely clear, and so she's demanding respect. Like, don't call it a baby, da 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 da. But
Yeah.
Hello, there's someone in the room who actually was a product of rape, and you're calling it a rapist baby, and she's asking you not to. You're acting like that doesn't matter, but then she tells you, well, actually, that's me, and then it matters. It's just so clear to me that she actually not only doesn't talk to pro-lifers, she doesn't understand our position, she also doesn't respect us as individuals up until this point. And I think because of the kindness we showed her, now she does, right?
Yeah.
But she's demanding a respect that she wasn't giving to us initially.
Also,
really
it's
quickly
like
too on
she's-
the. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, she's talking about bodily autonomy, but then she's trying to police your language. Like, you have to say fetus, you can't say baby. But like, wait, hold on, I thought you're all about bodily autonomy, and then you're gonna tell people how to talk.
Yeah, I really wish this was brought up during the debate, but with her policing the language, I just think it's so ridiculous because she keeps appealing to medical accuracy, right? Like fetus is the medically accurate term, the scientifically accurate term, but baby is not a scientific term. The reason why people use baby, it is an informal term that expresses the relationship, right? So we don't use like Homo sapien. You know, every time we talk about a human being, right? Like just because it's textbook accurate doesn't necessarily mean that is the most realistic or accurate way to refer to somebody, because relationships are also real. They're also accurate, right? Like I could refer to my mom using her like name, or I could refer to her using mom. Technically her name would be accurate, but mom is an expression of the relationship that I have to my mother. And so using the term baby expresses a relationship. Like you don't actually use the term baby after birth as a scientific term. It's not a scientific term. It is a relational, informal term that we even use when we, talk about our loved ones. People talk about their boyfriends and they use the term baby. It expresses a relationship, right? And so to say that it's inaccurate is kind of question begging, again, because the whole point is that like you're saying that it's inaccurate only because you're assuming that there is no true morally binding relationship there as well. And the other thing is too, on her logic, is that if the principle is this is racist because it disproportionately impacts this group of people more, then depending on where you fall on the question of what is the preborn, abortion is racist on that logic of just disparate impact. It impacts the Black community more. Like you could just flip it around on its head. She says that abortion bans impact Black women more because Black women have more abortions. True, but then that means by extension that abortion impacts Black babies more. So if you agree that abortion takes a human life, that it is a human being that is being killed, then isn't that also racist because more Black babies are killed than they're born in some states?
It's just one giant, big question begging prompt. It really is.
Exactly.
She's just assuming her position underneath the prompt.
Did you guys like agree to her qualifications there? Like her saying, don't use the word baby? I'm curious if that was like a non-starter for you guys.
I wouldn't have, if she said don't use that word, I wouldn't have agreed, but she didn't say that until after my prompt was over. But I will tell you, if she would have asked that of me, I would have pushed her on that.
Yeah, it would be like debating a member of the KKK and saying, okay, well, you can't call African Americans Black people. You have to call them Homo sapiens. I'd be like, hell no, dude. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right?
Although
like,
it did help set up, agreeing to that actually did help set up Anne's point really well. So I would definitely push back. I'm with you on that one, on using that language, but it ended up working out really great.
To talk about class.
I'll talk about class.
Let's talk about class then.
I just want to follow your logic a little bit on class. So are you saying that it is classist because only wealthy people would be able to sort of evade the law? Is that your logic? Like if we were to ban abortion was completely illegal, only these wealthy women would be able to evade the law?
I mean, that's
Great
a smaller part of
question.
it. not really. I mean, that is part of it. So
Okay.
thank you for making half.
I wanna just
But
address
that's
that.
not my main argument.
Okay.
My main argument is that the number one reason why which women get abortions is financial, right? They do not believe that they can support a child, and 60% of women who get abortions have already had a child, so they don't believe they can support a second.
I wanted
right?
to say two things on this. So number one, do you think children born to poverty, their life is less valuable than children born to wealthy families?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and so if I were, let's say, to fall into poverty tomorrow, would I be morally justified to kill my toddler because she may suffer life of
Toddler's not
poverty?
fetus. Toddler can survive
Okay, so
independently.
then
If you want to put your toddler up for
you're
adoption because you no longer
presupposing
support that, I would be
But number
absolutely
two, just to kind of follow your logic on the wealthy women evading laws, should we
well, that wasn't my point. That was your point. But
you
sure.
agreed. I heard you. That's what it sounds
Okay,
like.
if you want to talk about
I'm
that,
not going to address any other thing. Do
Yeah,
you
that's
know
all
the number one reason why women get abortions? Like, what's the number one indicator of why a woman gets an abortion?
I just said it.
Convenience.
Being unmarried. So 88% of women that get abortions are not married.
Yeah, but the
African Americans
reason why
have the
they get it is
lowest.
financial.
They have the lowest marriage
Let's
rate of Black women.
go.
We want to talk about why Black women are getting abortions. Wouldn't you be more interested in pushing that community towards a culture of marriage and having children within marriage?
Sure, but those things aren't mutually exclusive. I don't know why I would like solely focus on one thing and not the other
Well,
when there are
you're
women who are being forced to
against
give birth that they
abortions
don't
up to an
want right now. But my point about classism actually wasn't what you said. The point about classism that I'm trying to make is that 42% of women who are seeking abortive care of all races are living below the federal poverty line, right? And then 75% of women who seek abortive care classified as federally low income, right? So poor women, we see very obviously seek abortive care more than any other group, right? Regardless of race.
So
And the reason why they do this is because it costs on average $17,000 a year to raise a baby.
The life in the womb, the fetus in the womb, and provide for parenting, post birth, like parenting, education of the mother, employment of the mother, support of the child, however that looks, or the option to adopt, because yes, women can be in impossible situations. My mom was one of them. And adoption did allow, well, she raised me, but she could have adopted me out if she was not, for whatever reason you're saying, unable to parent me.
I would prefer that over this state that we are currently in. Right? I would absolutely prefer it. I still have some issues with it, but on the subject of adoption, there's 350,000 children in our foster care system. We know that up to 40% of them will be abused. We know that at least 20% of them will become homeless in this lifetime, and a smaller percentage of them were adopted out of the system than became homeless.
But adoption and foster care aren't the same thing.
Yeah, but where do children who haven't been adopted go?
Foster
No understanding of foster care at all.
Yeah.
None.
That was rough.
Classic talking point.
That was rough.
By the way, guys, do you know child neglect laws? Guys, they're racist. Child neglect laws are totally racist. They only impact poor people. We have to abolish all child neglect laws.
Yeah, it's such a
because
crazy
they
point.
disproportionately affect poor Black people.
I mean, it was. I'm not sure if someone actually said it, but I really wish someone would have just said like, okay, so what's the alternative here, just to kill them? Like, if they're going to
Yeah.
be poor, they're going
Right.
to be put in adoption. What is the greater what is the greater good in your opinion? Just to kill them? Because that's basically what she's saying. That's what she's asking us to agree to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like I said, guys, I wish that this could have been a 3-hour stream, but unfortunately, I have to go. I have to cut it short today because I have friends in town, and I told them I would take them to see Cirque Soleil because.
What up?
And you guys don't know is a Muslim
guys,
apologist.
You guys are awesome. I was just on my phone and listening in. I'm not really familiar with the pro-life, pro-choice environment, but this is crazy, and you guys are doing God's work. So,
amen.
I've seen your content
Hey.
online. I love your content, by the way. Never
Yeah,
met
you do great stuff.
God bless you guys.
We need
You too.
Christian apologists in the Muslim space, Christian apologists in the pro-life space.
Amen.
We fully endorse Shayla. Shayla's the GOAT.
Shayla is a good underground. Amen. Well, yeah. So I got to get them to see some circus carnies right now. So I know that
Nice.
it's way more important when it comes to topic matters, but I did promise them that I'd take them to go see Cirque Soleil. So
You should bring him to my house next week when you and Angel come over.
well, that's actually just for me and Angel, just me and Angel.
Got it.
But when you guys come to Vegas, when you and Lori come to Vegas, we'll take you to see.
Let's go. Let's go.
Well, I love you
Great
guys.
work, guys. Great work.
I'm
Thank
Nice to
really-
meet you all.
Thanks for having us, Shayla.
I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Daff, just saying thank you so much for hosting all of us. Like I said, got to meet awesome people like Taylor. I hadn't met her before. I got to meet some amazing women there, and I got to meet up with friends that I was already connected with online, like Liana. I'm thankful that Micah came out and watched as he cheered on his mom. It's just so cool. I'm thankful to AJ because AJ helped me prep for this debate. I'm just so whenever I'm in a room full of Christians that are standing for what is righteous and what is truth, I just am welled with pride of like, man, like this is really what it means to be part of the family of God. that we are making
Amen.
righteous stands against evil. And so I just want to let you know, like, that's how I felt that day. I'm not saying Naima is evil. I'm saying, but she has evil beliefs that we need to tear down, that we need
Amen.
to stand up against, right? And so look, I want to just let the audience know, I know we spoke a little bit harshly of Naima. We're tearing down her ideas and her beliefs, not her as a person. We're going to keep her in
Exactly.
prayer. It does seem like the Holy Spirit has been working on her heart. The Holy Spirit definitely, through the act of love and kindness that the pro-lifers showed her, she did change her disposition at the end of this debate. And so let's continue to pray for her soul, continue to
Yep.
pray for the Holy Spirit conviction that she would be saved.
Amen.
And then I believe, of course, like, her beliefs will follow, but we want to mainly keep her soul in our prayers and keep her in our prayers. Amen.
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 Yeah.
Well, I love you
So
guys.
proud of all
Love
the
you guys
women there.
all.
You
That's
guys did so
great.
great. It
Yes.
was
Killed
incredible.
it.
It was incredible.
Amen. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. And I want to say thanks again for coming on my stream. I appreciate you guys.
God
Of
bless.
course.
Thanks for having us, Shayla.